USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Tuesday, November 26, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger along with Jim Connelly. Over the weekend, College Hockey Inc. celebrated its 10th anniversary, telling the story of college hockey and helping market the sport.
And we are joined now by the executive director of College Hockey Inc. That's Mike Snee. And Mike, congratulations on 10 years as an organization. I know you haven't been there exactly from the start, but you've been through most of it. It's got to be great to know what you've accomplished thus far in the first decade.
Yeah, it feels that way. I guess it's not something where we don't manufacture anything, so we can't, or build anything, so we can't necessarily see what has occurred. But it does feel like the awareness level, many different ways to measure it, of college hockey is pretty high. But as Nate Ewell, my longtime colleague, and Sean Hogan, our new colleague, as we say to each other quite frequently, we have a heck of a product. So everybody involved in college hockey really makes our jobs pretty easy, actually.
Some people sit there and if they're not intimately involved, they don't have anybody going through the recruiting process. They might not even understand what College Hockey Inc., what their purpose is. Can you maybe just, kind of outline that for the listeners to really understand things as we get into what you really do and what you have accomplished?
And it's not easy to state it in an elevator pitch, especially if somebody does have just moderate experience in hockey. But hockey is unique, especially at this age level, and how a player sees him or herself developing, and especially on the men's side with certain opportunities that a player can do that may affect their college eligibility, and they might do that at a pretty young age, as young as 14 years old. So we just want to make sure that, in a sentence, that people's perception of college hockey is equal to the reality of college hockey in 2019. It is such a great place to spend that part of your hockey career, both from a hockey standpoint and a life standpoint. And in some places, I would say that perception is equal to the reality, but in other places, it's not. And so we want to just tell the story of college hockey over and over and in many different ways, so that people have that full appreciation for college hockey and the role it plays in a person's hockey development.
You mentioned earlier Sean Hogan. He's the new director of education for College Hockey Inc. And Ed and I, on an earlier podcast this week, we were talking about the fact that CHI is almost like another one of the schools because it's an educational body. It teaches people that are interested in playing the game what they have to do, what are some of the key requirements, what are some of the key processes that they need to go through to become a college hockey player. Obviously, Sean in his new role, that's going to be a big part of it. But just go through the educational piece and what you folks do. I know you travel throughout the U.S., you travel through Canada, might even go over to Europe now, I'm not even sure, but just, expanding the game in those areas, but also providing information because, as you mentioned, there are so many bylaws, rules that people have to follow. Understanding them all can be a tough path to navigate.
Yeah, it certainly can be. And as you mentioned, our sport's never been this international. So approximately 28% of our players are Canadian. That seems to be the yearly number, give or take a percentage. But there's more Canadian or more European players playing college hockey this year than ever before. 117 total. That's almost 2 per program. And if you go back even just as recently as 5 years ago, that number was down around 40. So the sport has as much worldwide appeal as it ever has, and that's wonderful. But that does add an element to it in terms of both academic eligibility and amateur eligibility. So we'll talk to anybody that's interested, but our target really is, I would say, the 13 to 17-year-old aspiring player, with probably a real target of the 14 and 15-year-old player. And we talk to them on behalf of all of college hockey. It's not about any one program or any one conference. And just make sure at that point before they've done anything to negatively affect either their academic eligibility or their amateur eligibility, that they know what's ahead of them. And we do find, especially in certain areas, I think that there's a perception that it's more daunting than it really is, meaning that you have to be, a world scholar, or there are all of these courses that you need to take that you otherwise wouldn't have to take. And when you talk to people on the back end after they've gone through it all, I think they generally will say it wasn't nearly as difficult or as overbearing as they might have expected it. So that's part of it too, is to ease their minds, let them know that this really isn't a challenging process. And if you do encounter a challenge along the way, or you just need a question answered, we're here. We're a nonprofit. We never charge, and we want them to see us as partner with them as they pursue NCAA hockey. So you mentioned the events that we're at. We owe a ton to USA Hockey. They provide us with most of our funding, but then they also invite us into all of their events, and we're able to get in front of players and families and just make sure that they know about it. They appreciate it. They realize how good college hockey is. And then as they age, they know that we're a resource there for them.
We're talking with Mike Snee, Executive Director of College Hockey, Inc. One of the other things that I know is part of that education is about college hockey being a great path to the National Hockey League. And we saw last year, Cale Makar as a runner-up for the national championship immediately step into the lineup and score a goal, I think on his first shot, and certainly on his in his first game with the Avalanche in the playoffs last year. But when you look at guys like Makar or Johnny Gaudreau or Adam Fox or Ryan Donato or Jack Eichel, that is a pretty good advertisement that the college route is great for development. What kind of things do you tell aspiring players about their future development by going the college route?
Well, from a hockey development standpoint, I think one is to understand that it gives you the most time. All right. So let's say that if you use all of your post-high school, college eligible junior hockey, USHL, North American League, British Columbia League, Alberta League, whatever it might be, and that'll take you up to age 20. And then you play 4 years of NCAA hockey. Now that takes you to 24 or 25. You can really put yourself onto what I would call a developmental, as opposed to strictly performance-based track. Now, you don't need to use all of it if you don't want to. Jack Eichel, he got off after 1 year. Cale Makar got off after 2. Johnny Gaudreau got off after 3. So it's there if you need it, and most players do need it. 70% of college guys that are in the NHL played at least 3 years of college hockey. So Jack Eichel is actually pretty rare of those players. I think people assume that number is higher in terms of players in the NHL that left after 1 year of college. It's actually pretty low, but because of the profile of some of those guys, I think it gets distorted a bit. But I think that's the number one thing, is that you have a long runway. You're not forced to turn pro at age 20. But then on the backside of it, when you dig into what does it look like when you're on campus, you do play fewer games, but you're on the ice more often. So those games aren't replaced with nothing. Let's say you play 40 to 45 college hockey games instead of 70 games. Those, well, let's say, what would that be? 25 extra days there. That's not replaced with a day off. That's replaced with a hard practice. So you're on the ice more often because at a practice, you're on the ice more often. But the game schedule itself, the Friday, Saturday game format, really lends itself to the opportunity to continue your development off the ice in terms of the weight room and training, and not just try to maintain, but try to grow and get stronger. So as I had I steal a lot of the phrases I use, but one player said that what he found out when he was in college hockey was that he was able to work out like it was the off season in season. Whereas the other hockey he had been in, mostly professional hockey, you're not working out like it's the off season in season. And then when you think about it, whenever you're done with college hockey, whether it's 1 year like Jack Eichel or 4 years like most players, when you step into the league, you're going up against guys that in some cases can be, 8, 9, 10 years older than you. And what that means is 8, 9, or 10 years of more getting bigger, getting stronger, becoming more of a man. So it's the most important time, I think, to be prepared to play that type of hockey. So that's really what it is about the college environment. However, we'll say there isn't a league in the world that has cornered the market on players getting to the NHL. And in fact, whatever the league is, most guys will not make a living at hockey. As good as they all are, most guys will not make a living at hockey. So while you are doing this on a college campus and reaching your full potential, you're also obviously attending class, getting your degree, and all the other aspects that come with that part of life development. So it's the 360 degree, and it's an and proposition. It's not an either or, meaning you are developing as a hockey player, reaching your full potential, and getting your degree. You're not delaying one and get to it down the road perhaps. So it's do both at the same time, not either A or B, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And one additional thing that we don't always talk about is how specialization and technology can have an impact on that. Specialization as in specific strength and conditioning coaches working individually with players, and technology, even as I'm hearing now, players the next day getting video sent to their phone of all their plays broken down. I doubt that you're going to find anything better than either one of those than you do at the college level until you get to the NHL level.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I steal lines from people when they say things that reveal itself to me. And similar to that, another person who had played college hockey said that he didn't expect to realize how motivated he would become by all of the athletes at the school that he went to. So similar to how you have those professionals, like you mentioned, from the strength and conditioning standpoint or from a nutrition standpoint. He said you also just look around and you see all of these other elite athletes, whether they're football players, volleyball players, basketball players, track athletes. And he said you become part of a team of 400 or 500 athletes, not just a team of 25 hockey players. And he went quite in depth about how inspired he was by watching them work out and working out with them. And I had never thought of it that way, but I thought that was a pretty unique way of looking at something that really is only going to happen in a college environment.
One other landmark with the NHL is last season, 1/3 of the NHL, 33%, 327 total players. That's one of the pieces of information that when I tell people about college hockey who are not familiar with it, if I tell them that, their eyes get big. They had no idea. That is really significant. And how much of an increase is that over the past several years?
Oh, it's significant from the turn of the century. So just 20 years ago, it was right around the low 20s. You go back into the 80s and it was around 10%. And then you go back to when I was born and it was around 10. And there was a time where there was one, and it was Red Berenson. For a time during his career, he was the one and only. So to go from literally one player to 1 out of 3 players in the league says a lot about what's happened. It actually says a lot about Red Berenson because he was told by everybody to do along the way to not do what he did, and he kept doing what he did, and it certainly paid off for him, and he blazed a trail for a lot of people. But I think it's reflected in just the mindset of people. Leadership in the NHL at one time perhaps were those that were most keeping, I guess, this incorrect perception alive. And now I think even they have changed and realized the benefits of having players that they have drafted, let's say, stay in college. And so it's just becoming, it's feeding itself. Now it's not trying to convince the NHL. It's the NHL saying, we actually want you to play in college because of the development opportunities that are there. So I think that speaks to why it's gone from one player to 10% to 20%. Now, like you said, to a record high, 1/3 of the league, 327 total players. And if you just look at the players that were first-year players in the NHL last year, the rookies, it was an even higher percentage. So it doesn't appear that number is going to go backwards anytime soon.
We'll continue with Mike Snee from College Hockey Inc. here on USCHO Spotlight in a moment.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from US College Hockey Online.
We're talking with Mike Snee, the executive director of College Hockey Inc. And Mike, since College Hockey Inc. began 10 years ago, Penn State, they added varsity Division I hockey. Arizona State did the exact same thing. We've seen USA Hockey, the NHL, and CHI partner up to develop these feasibility studies for additional programs that want to add. Obviously, addition, we want to know about addition, but with addition comes restructuring, as we saw with the Big Ten, created the NCHC, a lot of movement. There's goods and bads, there's positives and negatives. We worry about the Alaska schools now, and we worry about Alabama, Huntsville. So as we grow, as we expand, are there concerns of where the game goes in the future?
I'd say there's always concerns. There's always you brought up the Alaska schools, and as much as we are focusing on growth, we don't want to come at the expense of an existing school or schools. So that's a challenge. It does seem like things have a way of working themselves out, and hopefully that's the case here. But if we can assist in some way, we will. From a growth standpoint, and you brought up the NHL, and their support has been tremendous. USA Hockey as well, and even the NHLPA, the Players Association, has partnered in that. So we've got a number of projects at other schools at different points in progress towards considering adding men's and or women's hockey. And it's exciting to see the number of schools that are considering it. But at the same time, I don't know if there's ever been a time, or at least there hasn't been a time in my memory, where there's been as many different schools that have either won a national championship recently or are in the mix to win their first national championship. So I'm hopeful that type of thing, knowing that Providence won their first one recently, Duluth won their first one just a few years ago, and now they've won 3. Quinnipiac's in the mix, Mankato, St. Cloud State, a number of schools that hadn't been in that national championship conversation are now. So hopefully that will be incentive and motivation for schools to realize that hockey is a sport they need to keep, because it's a sport that they can succeed at nationally, even as the sport continues to grow and hopefully flourish like it has the past few years.
I realized I just framed the question on a positive thing, like expansion, in kind of a negative light. But the positive side is the possibility of adding programs. Obviously, Arizona State has started a lot of buzz on the Pac-12 territory. They're a success almost immediately as a program. We've heard about Illinois. Navy's a team that's always kind of thrown around as a potential name. But what can you tell us about expansion? Obviously, we know Illinois completed their potential assessment of adding the sport, but what can you tell us at this point about the possibility of growth in the very near future?
Well, in some cases, not a lot, because some of the schools we're working with have requested that it be done in a confidential environment for good reasons. You brought up Illinois, and they're one that is doing it in a public way. At times, it feels like it's taking forever. And at other times you realize, I don't think it's even been 3 years yet. So the growth that you mentioned at Penn State and Arizona State happened because of incredible generosity from, in Penn State's case, one family, the Pagula family, and in Arizona State's case, 2 different anonymous donors. Illinois is pursuing it in a completely different way, where it's a partnership with the community. It fulfills needs for other sports on campus, volleyball, wrestling, gymnastics. The facility does. And they're partnering with many different generous people, none of them giving, one big gift to make it happen. And then they've even got some corporate support there. So I think by design, that's going to take longer. However, what's exciting for us is that's much more repeatable. And a few of the schools that we're working with in a more confidential way are doing it along the Illinois approach versus the other 2. So our hope is, and hope's not always, I wish it was, we had more than hope, but a little bit of this is hope, is that Illinois will figure this out, and we're confident they will. Some pretty motivated, inspired people there trying to get this done, that they will get it done. And like Arizona State, like Penn State, I think they'll be just as successful, both on the ice, in the stands, and otherwise. And it will help our cause with these other schools that we're working with, and add to it that it was done by bringing together multiple groups and not relying on any one generous, single family. So that's where we're at with growth. It is exciting to think about the impact that can have just on the sport in general in our country. When you think of all of the living alumni of a school like Illinois or a school like Arizona State, Arizona State played a series in Minnesota late last season, and I went to one of those games, and I was struck by how many Arizona State alum were there. And I spoke with their coach, Greg Powers, afterwards, and he made a really good point. In the places that Arizona State goes to play their games in hockey, whether it's here in Minnesota or out east or Michigan or wherever, are areas that Arizona State doesn't generally venture to play sports because it's outside of their conference footprint. So their hockey team really is allowing them to get in front of all of these alumni that don't generally get to go to a basketball or a football or a volleyball game. And so to think if we can repeat that elsewhere and have all of these people who love whatever school it is, Arizona State or Illinois, now give them our sport, let them try hockey, whether it's with a pitchfork on or with the Illinois eye. This might be how we get a large group of new people in the U.S. to love our sport. So that's an underlying piece to this all along. Is as great as this is for college hockey to grow it, I think it's a big piece to just continuing the growth of the sport of hockey in the U.S. in general.
Mike, we always talk, when we talk expansion, we always talk about new schools that don't have hockey, or some of them have club programs that exist. But one of the things that has always caught my eye being a New Englander is that there's a group of schools that are kind of in limbo here, Division II schools that never decided to go to Division I when the MAC was created back in the late 90s, but they also didn't take a step back to Division III in terms of their hockey program. They still play Division II, but there's no real championship for them. Is there any future, is there any discussion with those schools about potentially moving up their hockey programs so that they can at least compete in an NCAA sanctioned division that has a potential year-end championship for them?
I would say there's been some, initial informal conversations about it. I know that the NUHA Women's Conference is similar with some of the Division II athletic departments that now have combined and formed a Division I conference. And because there's not a championship offered at Division II for either men's or women's hockey, those schools can choose to play up, I guess, if you want to use that phrase. I don't know if that's an NCAA sanctioned phrase, but play up and compete at the Division I level. So those schools would have the opportunity to do that if they chose to, and they just, don't for, of course, it's a much bigger investment in the sport. It would be great if those schools would. But I also understand every school has its unique circumstances that might not mean it can be done, or at least it can't be done at this time. So we've had informal conversations with them without answering questions on their behalf. I'm not aware of any significant interest at this time, but they would know more than I would.
Well, we've done a lot of conversation here today about the first 10 years of College Hockey Inc. and all the success that is being seen now. As we look another 5 or 10 years down the road, what kind of things do you want to see accomplished in college hockey, especially the areas where College Hockey Inc. can be a part?
I'd say we just want it to continue. And then I think because of the nature of the type of people that we are, we want it to continue even faster. So we've got the chart, the curve pointed in the right direction. We just want to make it steeper. How do we get to 34% of the NHL? How do we get to 35% of the NHL even quicker? But as importantly, right now we got a 92% graduation rate. How do we get to 93%? How do we get to 94%? So how are we ensuring that the entire purpose for being a college hockey player, the hockey player part of it and the college student part of it, and continue to assist in being part of that? But in reality, we're not really much of that. We're the storytellers. So it's the student athletes and it's the schools they go to and the coaches they play for and the administration at the school that is the one putting together that ever increasing percentage in the NHL and that ever growing graduation rate. Nate, Sean, and I really just try to put it in a box and tell it as often as we can and as wide and far as we can. So I don't want to overstep our bounds in saying that we're part of that. But I think that if we can make sure that everyone's aware of it and people are aware that, Cale Makar is, you've seen him. He's an extremely special player. And if you talk with Cale or talk with his parents, they will credit college hockey and everything that came before that. In Cale's case, the Alberta Junior Hockey League and then the Alberta Youth Hockey League as part of his success. So I guess I say that meaning like whether you're Cale Makar and you're the 4th overall pick and you're perhaps destined to be a generational player, or you're somebody that needs as much time as you can get and you become a 4-year player and then you find your way into the NHL and you're able to have a solid NHL career, or neither of those, that your experience of being a college hockey player is going to be a wonderful thing for you. And I saw it. I guess I don't even know if I'm answering your question. But what I want to say about it is, how can we continue to tell those stories and extend beyond just the Cale Makar or the other NHL players, but also share all the ones where they played 4 years of college hockey and then moved into something perhaps that had nothing to do with hockey and are having tremendous success in life. And it's in part because of the experience they had as a college hockey player. So we just want to continue to see what's happening now happen in the future, and how can we make it happen even quicker and ensure that everybody is aware of it.
Mike, before we let you go, you said you're a storyteller, so I'm going to get to give you the opportunity to expound on one great story of the last month, and that's Jerry York from Boston College going into the Hockey Hall of Fame, not just the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, nothing to do strictly with college hockey. This is a league of mostly NHLers when you look in that hall. And Jerry York is a college hockey coach, and strictly as a college hockey coach now in the Hockey Hall of Fame. How big is that for the game? That's a great story to tell.
It's another example, I think, of just how accepted college hockey is today by the people involved in hockey. I don't know if Jerry had done all that he did 20 years ago, I don't know if he would have gotten in, because I don't think that college hockey was held in as high a regard as it is. Jerry's just the perfect first person to be that person, to go in that regard. And I guess you might count John Mariucci, who's in there as well, had a similar path. But I think he's the first of many. I think this will open the doors to all of the other very worthy people who only spent their time coaching college hockey, or mostly college hockey. And I'm sure you both know Jerry, just such a nice, wonderful person, cares about people, cares about everybody, loves the game, and has accomplished so much, not just at one school, but at 3 different schools. So it's a great moment for college hockey, and another one of those things that you can point to and say college hockey in 2019 is just in a different place than it's ever been.
Well, it certainly is, and it seems to be in a great place and headed in a great direction. College Hockey Inc. has been a big part of that over the last decade, and Mike Snee and your staff, Nate Ewell, Sean Hogan, you guys do a great job. We appreciate everything you do, because it makes our jobs as journalists and people that want to evangelize for this game even easier to know that there's somebody doing it at a level higher than us. So thanks for everything you do, and obviously thanks for taking the time today to talk to us.
Well, thanks, Jim and Ed, and we appreciate everything that you guys and USCHO does, and we look forward to the next 10 years and beyond.
Jim, it's always great to talk to Mike Snee, and we are definitely grateful for everything they do.
Yeah, you know what? When you look at what they've accomplished in 10 years, I remember so clearly when they announced what they were going to do 10 years ago. And I sat there and said, what the heck is this organization planning on doing? I don't get it. And I didn't understand at the time. And maybe even it took me a little bit of time to really see where they were headed. But with Nate Ewell and Mike Snee, and when they both came aboard, I really kind of saw this as I mentioned on an earlier podcast, kind of an educational organization. And they've done such a great job of informing and educating, not just the potential players, as has become such a big role for them, but the media, schools that want to maybe add college hockey, the fans. I mean, I live on their website on the weekends in their stat portal. They provide so much incredible statistical information, next generation type stats that you see at the NHL level. I mean, I look at everything that they've done and accomplished, and I kind of shake my head, not believing that they could accomplish so much in just 10 years.
And something that I think they've also accomplished is helping bring all the different conferences together and helping to bring people's view of college hockey into a more national focus.
I think that's right. I think there's still a lot of work to be done on the conference level to really get every conference on the same page, because I think, as we saw back when the CCHA broke up and the Big Ten was formed. It was kind of an every man for itself. And I think that College Hockey Inc. has tried to do a better job at that. But I still think that we're in a position that conferences are very provincial and they'll still go in different directions when they need to. And they're really looking out for themselves. I'd love to see more work done at that level. But I think in terms of how they promote the game and how they market the game, it does feel more of a national sport. We don't look at it as the East versus the West as much as we once did. I don't think we look at different styles of play and different styles of administrating and different styles of officiating between East and Western conferences anymore. That used to be a very demarked line that was out there, and I don't think that is the case as much anymore. And I think a lot of that is maybe
This is Billy, the USCHO Spotlight, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online.
There's more of a national feel.
Visit USCHO.com/podcast to listen or subscribe.
College Hockey Inc. on a successful decade, and here's to many, many more years of success. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.